Hi. Hello.
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 Hello and welcome to Architecting.
I'm kind of a wannabe architect who had the great good fortune to discover early on that I really stink at architectural design.
And, sort of allow that to mesh with a beautiful sort of story. It's an idea or concept or just, I say that I don't know if I've had it because I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know when I get there, I'll know what it looks like.
Hello and welcome to Architecting. In this show, we dive into the act of being an architect, the people and the stories behind the buildings and the images. With our very interconnected international worlds that we live in, this show will purposely be local and narrow, only focusing on the Colorado community of designers. My name is Adam Wagoner. I'm a Denver-based architect. I'm married to an architect. I have 2 architecture degrees from Kansas State and Yale. I've worked for firms around the world in Wichita, Kansas City, Rotterdam, New Haven, Mexico City, and now Denver, where I'm at Open Studio Architecture and teach at the University of Colorado, Denver. I really love to be rooted in this Colorado community of designers for the last 5 years and enjoy reaching out and engaging and speaking with architects that I appreciate. And now I've decided to broadcast these conversations with the goal of creating a stronger community. So today I get to speak with one of my good friends in this community, Annicia Streete. So Annicia grew up in Trinidad and Tobago before moving to South Dakota and attending the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology in Civil Engineering. After this, Annicia received a Master's of Architecture degree from the University of Colorado, Denver, and worked at H&L Architecture and then Sprocket Design Build, both in Denver. She's also taught at the University of Colorado, Denver for over a decade, and this year became a full-time visiting assistant professor. She serves as a faculty advisor for the AIAS and is on the founding team of the Colorado chapter of the National Organization of Minority Architects. So Annicia is a good friend and has a very interesting story, and I'm happy to be able to share it with you. Thanks. Hey, we're happy to be sponsored by Modern in Denver magazine. For over a decade, they've been crafting fantastically curated content on Colorado designers and projects, spreading the gospel of good design within our region.
And I love how the goal of Modern in Denver aligns with the goal of this podcast, to better build up and connect the community of Colorado designers. So go buy a copy of the magazine at your local bookstand, subscribe to their weekly email list, and follow them on Instagram.
Check it out. Hey, Annicia.
Hi, Adam.
How's it going? There we go.
I am good. And you?
Good. This is the first Zoom interview I've done. The rest have been like live on Instagram Live. And
Okay.
so there's always been this pressure of like people watching you, and it's always a little weird to like get it going for the guest. And then I thought Zoom would be nice and easy, and then I messed it up.
Oh no.
but now we're on. So how's it going? Good to see your face.
Good to see you too. It seems like such a long time, but then not really, but then long again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I know. What does your day look like today?
Well, I have today's Thursdays and Fridays are my research and admin my specifically research days, and then I have some administrative tasks I sort of do at the end of that time. I've been trying to hold these 2 days real sort of sacred in terms of but I'm a busybody, and I it's hard for me to slow down sometimes, but I'm doing much better at it.
I like that. So that's going to be that leads us right into our first question of, if you had a two-line bio, who are you in 2 lines? Like I've heard you say to students, what's your concept in 2 sentences? Who are you in 2 sentences?
Yeah. and this is going to be this, I love this challenge because I always like to throw everything I throw at my students, I like to throw it at myself. But knowing myself, I would say that I am a very sort of dedicated and passionate person in whatever type of endeavor I undertake, whether it be teaching architecture, teaching dance, training models, or just even telling a story. That is who I am.
Nice. This is so good. I like, so far we've had just like some architects on here. And like Dinia said, I have no other hobbies. I have nothing else. I have no other hobbies, me, myself. And now I'm glad to get somebody bring some diversity on here of at least interest. So how did you get there? So what was that first line? You said you bring passion and
I'm passionate about whatever endeavor I undertake.
Nice. So when did that, has that always been there since you're a child?
Yeah, you know what? And I was thinking, when you approached me about this, I said, Adam, I don't know if an hour will do, but we got to make it do. But the other thing I think I was thinking about is that I can't speak of myself as I am right now without acknowledging and sharing where I came from, like the, sort of the real, background of where I came from. And I tried to even go back to that. I'm sorry?
South Dakota.
Oh, God. Yeah. That's the big secret, right?
Yeah, right.
That's where this accent comes from, right?
Yeah. Typical South Dakotan accent.
Typical South Dakota.
Sorry, keep going. I interrupted.
No. And thanks for bringing that up, because that has been like a running joke for all these years, and I have a little fun with it, so I really enjoy that. No, but I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago, Twin Island Republic in the Caribbean, last island in the archipelago that stretches all the way down to South America. But I always try to remember myself, even growing up there. And it's funny you ask that question, because sometimes I ask myself, okay, so where did all this energy come from? Like, why, trying to get to the root of like, can I like train myself to like just slow down a little bit, But I realize, the way I grew up, my family members, just sort of the type of family unit we had, and just being in that culture. First of all, we love to have fun. There's this, saying that Trinidadians love to party. We know how to throw a party. But there were so many things that I now, as I reflect, realize how they've sort of impacted me, whether I was, whether I was in a work setting or having fun, just, typical socializing, being at home, and any of that. I realized it was time spent with my grandmother. I grew up very closely with my grandmother. She was very hardworking. So I think I definitely got some of that with her. I spent some of my years after that with my aunt and my cousins. And there's even a backstory to that. But my first few years, I did live with my mother, but my mom, came to the US to ahead of me to, sort of look for work and sort of improve her situation. So I stayed back there and I lived with my aunt and my cousins, and my aunt was also very dedicated and pushed us, very hard. And I think Adam, that's just where, she would tell us it didn't matter whether we were looking, at our academics or playing sports or whatever it was, she expected, us to really push ourselves. It wasn't just, excel, but push yourself to understand, what you can do, what you can be, what that sort of highest potential was. So I think that's where it stems from.
Yeah. And so what did that look like for you when you were there? I mean, thinking about what you could be, was there a real image in your mind of what that is, or did it come along?
Yeah, I would say it wasn't, sort of clear cut very early on. I was exposed to a lot in terms of academics, and, certain, fields of interest for me. I had, and, speaking primarily to architecture and design, and I'll stretch it even to construction, which I've, been involved in. I had uncles, and my father. Let me start with my father. In addition to my uncles, were in the field of, it was engineering, construction primarily. And I remember with my dad specifically, he would, come pick me up after school on days that my mother wasn't picking me up. And he always had to stop at the construction site. And I mean, even though, the earliest memory I had, I was 5, and you would think, okay, what does a 5-year-old have to do after school? Well, I had plans, okay? I always had plans. And I remember thinking, okay, he has to stop at the construction site. Okay. And I would get there, and the first thing I would do is sort of dig into his tool bag. He was there doing whatever. And he told me that he didn't realize back then how much of an impact it would be, because, we ended up in the same field, but he just thought, I was playing, passing the time, which I was, but a lot of those memories stuck with me. And, when I lived with my aunt, my uncles who were also involved in the field, I remember I got my first custom drafting table. My one of my uncles had sort of sanctioned for me. And so that I realized, also sort of, influenced me, because he would come home and he had, he would bring home his drawings and do his redlining exercises, markups, all of that in the evening time when I would just be there hanging out, and he thought I was just kind of like kids just playing. But I realized how much a lot of that sort of got imprinted.
But you were actually marking red lines for him. He thought it was scribbles, but you were you were critiquing his line weights and his loads.
Yep. He would give me, like a blueprint that he wasn't, using anymore. Right. And I could, sort of do what I thought I was imitated,
Nice.
Yeah.
So what was that built environment like? I mean, growing up, it had to seem normal, right? But then you've lived in these different places. Like, how would you classify that, and how it might have had impact on you?
Growing up in Trinidad.
What city was it?
Port of Spain is the capital.
Okay. Yeah, the capital.
Yeah. So, and, it was 2 islands, so Trinidad and Tobago. I lived in Trinidad. I had family on both islands, but I grew up in Trinidad mostly. I have to say, growing up in Port of Spain, and then I'll get even more detail, the specific area of Port of Spain that I grew up in, Adam. And this is why I mentioned in the beginning, I can't tell you who I am today without giving you this back history. It's called Laventille. It's a French-derived name. Trinidad was, colonized by almost every European monarchy. And so this particular village I was from, Laventille, is, and I won't say was, but is and still known as one of the toughest places in Trinidad to grow up. And even today, I hear some of my, old neighbors from back there who, I still am in contact with, say that, they called me everything from a unicorn to, like, they'll say things like, you made it out, those types of things. But when I say one of the toughest places, like, I probably shouldn't be here today. But it was, the influence of my grandmother, my aunt, and, my mother had entrusted, her child,
right,
to be with, those family members and to take care of me. But one particular, and I'll just paint it really quick for you, so we had issues of, poverty, crime, social, inequities, just a lot of things which is weird to say, we're dealing with today, that was, sort of really, really rooted in terms of how we were living back there, all the way back to, slavery and colonial times. These things just trickled down. And so Here I am in this it was a beautiful village in Port of Spain, perched on top of this, overlooking the Caribbean Sea, tropical paradise, but one of the toughest places. My husband usually, I'll usually tell people, I'll use the term gangster's paradise, and he's like, no, Annicia, it's more than that. No, but I try to paint just sort of the dichotomy of like it was one of the toughest places, but one of the most beautiful places.
Right.
And so the architecture, of my village was a lot of what we call squatters, squatting type structures where, this is where most of the slaves settled, the African slaves settled when, slavery was abolished, but they weren't given any provisions to be able to start, to really start their home and establish, their future going forward. So it was a lot of houses very similar to what you see in Rio de Janeiro, the Brazilian favelas, in the slums of South Africa, the shanty towns, right? So very similar to that. And I grew up on the top of the hill in a series of building apartments. They used to call them plannings, where the government had temporarily built them to offer some assistance. They were supposed to come back and build them. These were boarded apartments, the wood was rotting. You could see outside and not even have to be outside. You could just see it through, holes in the apartment walls where they rotted. But they promised that they would come back to rebuild. And let's just say myself and my cousins and my friends, we all grew up there. It was long past the time that they said they were coming back. But that's the environment we had to live in while going to school, taking care of, just sort of daily living, being in a family unit, having friends and being there, and just, we were still functioning as normal. And I say that in quotes,
Right.
while having to deal with some of these societal issues like keeping ourselves safe. And I don't need to, spell out what specific things were.
Right.
So that was just, for me, I still even wonder, like, how was I able to sort of overcome that?
Yeah.
I had, it was some years seemed really tough, but then I think I had my aunt and my grandmother, and I'm not the only family, who may have had this experience, but I have other friends who certainly did well for themselves. My aunt and my grandmother, I have to like really credit them with sort of keeping us, how they say, keep you on the straight and narrow. Well, it was narrow, and they made sure it was straight.
That's good.
Yeah.
So then how did your mom like get out, like you said? I mean, that's a pretty tough
yeah,
to climb there.
it's typical. It was typical, Adam, for many families, particularly in the Caribbean, across multiple islands, where a family member would leave the island and come to the United States to find work, to earn money, and they would literally send what they need back to the family to help out. And so it was a big sacrifice on my mother's part too. I'm her only child, and when she made the decision, it was quite tough, for her to make that decision. But that's what many families did. One or two people would leave, and eventually more members would follow. But it was typically somebody working here in the US and sending money back, and I was used to that.
Yeah.
And I think that's that in a way sort of I won't say even matured my mind at that age. It did sort of put me a little bit in a different space compared to my friends who had both parents. I didn't grow up with both parents.
Because how old were you when she left?
I was 8.
8. Wow.
Yeah. I just turned 8.
And then how old were you when you joined her?
16.
Whoa. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. But an interesting thing happened when right after she left, in school. All of a sudden, I was doing fine, Adam. I was average.
I think you were probably better than average. But.
Average. Back then, they would place you, in at the end of the term. You first, second, third, fourth, all the way till whatever the last number in your class was. We have we have a little bit of a different system to America when you talk about, classes. It's a little bit different, but, I would be, 14th, second, all over the spectrum. And then as soon as my mother left, and if my aunt were telling the story now, as soon as my mother left, I started kicking butt.
Really?
Yes. And so my aunt, if I could give you a little bit of dialect here, she would say, it's like you were playing the fool all the time, huh? But and she was happy, but she was like, because it was every term. So in the year we had 3 terms, and you would get, evaluated each term. And all of a sudden I started, at the beginning it was second, third, and then it was just like first.
Wow.
And I have no idea what happened. I just got,
Yeah. Was it because of like your aunt and having to kind of adjust to a different person being in charge, or was it kind of a thing of showing your mom? Or
I think it was probably a combination, because when I had, resolved that, okay, she was gone, and I needed to make sure, I got over the bit of grief, that there was, and I remember getting up and saying, okay, so it's me now, and I have to make sure I stay on that straight. And
right.
And so I think it was a little bit of like, sort of like refocusing, which I'm still sort of surprised, because it's like at that age, like, was I really thinking about refocusing myself? It just seemed, to me like a young age, to be thinking that way.
But it had to be such a huge change. I mean, yeah, to have your mother leave. I mean, yeah, that had to kind of shock even a young person, Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was a bit of both. I think it was that, and then my aunt too, and my aunt had, I grew up with, I have a lot of cousins, we're a lot of girls, we're all around the same age, so it wasn't just me, she was helping to take care of, she had her girls too, but the way she did it is, I still think, is remarkable, how she was able to sort of, keep us all in check.
Yeah, wow.
She says so. Yeah, I mean, that environment, and that's why I said, and Adam, that I really appreciated, even the times that were tough and seemed like, like, okay, well, maybe no one should be going through this. But I also have to tell you something else about the area I grew up in, because it's another sort of like strange, twist. I remember there was one day, it was the end of the term, and I was coming home, got my report, and back then we have a book that's called a report book. I know it's a report card here in US, but we have a book.
Get a lot of classes, yeah.
Yes. And I remember I was walking up the hill, and my aunt had a little grocery. She was self-employed, little grocery on top of the hill, and every now and then she would look out the window and she could see us coming home, just to have some eyes on us. And I was maybe about a third of the way up the hill, Adam, and I saw a group of guys who I knew it was a known gang in our area. And as I was approaching, I was thinking, okay, maybe, they're just kind of hanging out, they wouldn't bother me or anything. And then I saw them starting to sort of work their way across the, sort of the path I was walking up, and it looked like they were blocking it. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm here by myself. I don't know if my aunt could see me just yet. I was close, but I didn't know if, she could see me. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, this is the feisty side of Annicia. You've probably seen. I started thinking, because I was running track, I was like, I counted how many of them it was, and I was like, I could outrun him. I could run him. That all of this was going through my mind. I didn't know what they were doing, but they had blocked the path I was walking up, and we call it a track. They had blocked it, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna go, and whatever happens, happens. I was prepared to either like sprint or whatever. And then the one who was the known leader came out in front of me and had the serious look on his face. And he said to me, where's your report book? And I'm like, what? And I'm thinking, okay, this is a little bit of a double standard. And he was like, can I see your report book? And all, the other guys just kind of stood behind him. And I pulled it out and I handed it to him. And he opened it, went through every single page and checked my grades. Yes. This really happened. And
he was just checking up on you, or was he trying to cross off the name and write his own name in there?
Well, he checked every grade, closed the book, and he said, "Good, you came first this term, this term." And I said, "Yeah." And he said a few other things, and then they parted, and then they let me pass. And then I told my aunt, and she was a little bit, because we all knew who they were. But, she was a little bit devastated at the time because, she didn't quite see me then. And do you know that every year, actually every term after that, I would be walking home, and if he was out, he would ask me for my report book.
Wow.
Checking it every year. And it became this really sort of, I said sort of twisted, a little bit sort of a weird relationship. But when I was leaving, when I was almost finishing up school, he asked me, he said, "Do you know why I've been doing this?" And he said, and I said, "No." He said, you must think that it seems strange because, I know what, I'm into and all of that. And he said, "It must seem strange. And I'm asking you, I'm checking up on you like this." And he said, "I don't want you to go this route. We're trying to save these last ones that, he said, whoever we can save, we're trying to." And he said, "You're one of the last ones. And whatever we can do, we're going to do it."
Wow.
And that's why he's been doing it all these years. And I did not know that. I always felt that this particular person, this individual, Adam, to me, he didn't just, he wasn't just the gangster of the area. I always felt like there was some hidden, intelligence to him that I couldn't put my finger on. And I reconnected with a neighbor recently, a few months ago. We were talking, and this neighbor was the first person I ever shared that experience with beside my aunt. And I'm talking about people from my village. I've shared it with, one or two people here in Denver, but he was the first person from my village I ever shared that to, because I didn't want to, I don't know, for whatever reason, I was thinking of protecting my family or what, I didn't want to sort of just blow this up.
Right.
And this neighbor told me, he said, "Do you know that this person so-and-so was quite intelligent. He just happened to fall into, the wrong business, at that time." And he said, "Yeah." So he said, all those times he was checking your book, that wasn't an act. He said, and I said, "Yeah, because he spent a detailed amount of time going through, and like really, really like paying attention to what was in the book." And I was like, that is why I said I always felt like there was something hidden about him that I didn't know. I couldn't put my finger on it. So all these years after, this neighbor who knew of this person sort of like, finished the story for me. He explained.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
So you had this really deep and intricate like community there that was kind of looking out for you, but also sort of dangerous. But it was robust.
Mm-hmm.
But then you moved to the United States, to South Dakota, right? And all that community goes away essentially, and environment, everything. It's totally changed, right? So what was that jump like?
Well, first of all, jump is the right word. Maybe even, I won't say a death leap, but we were, the community was, I was now reunited with my mother and my stepfather. He was in the Air Force. So that's how we ended up in South Dakota. And, for me, it was a transition where I went directly from Trinidad to South Dakota. Let me say that again, that tropical Trinidad to unpredictable weather, city, South Dakota. My mother and stepfather, they had been there some years in the military. So there was some, some friends that, had become, sort of real close family friends there. My church there became my community. When I started college, that became sort of my new community, even though I was this strange person to almost everyone in South Dakota, because the first thing I will, say is there are not a lot of Blacks in South Dakota. All right. And then here I am, I'm Black and I have this different accent. Somebody told me, they said you're not one of the normal Blacks. And I'm like, what's that? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And so, but what kicked in Adam, because I know when I got there, I had intentions to pursue architecture. But there wasn't an exclusive architecture program there. And my mom had told me about the engineering school there, the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. And I'd, done some research. And so, they were one of the top engineering schools in the country. So I found my way down there. I was still, new to the city, and my mother was even surprised. I had just been there, for a very short time, and found my way down to the campus, for myself, and spoke with an advisor. And she advised, the advisor, said, if you want to do architecture, but you're not, I was only 16 at the time. So for me, just being in the US was this new frontier, and I didn't, my mother was a little bit hesitant to sort of send me off to some, other college in another state, and I hadn't lived here by myself. So I spoke with the advisor, and she said, you could start, do your first degree in engineering, and then transition into a Master's of Architecture program. And so my degree, had the emphasis of structures behind it, which, facilitated that transfer. And so that became, I likened that to when my mom left at 8, and I was like, okay, got to refocus now. For me, it was like, okay, I'm here with her now, but she's trying to, sort of help me with this transition, but I needed to do part of that job too, and like refocus and get myself, like in college and on the path, to studying architecture. So that's how that, so, the first few months, sort of worked out in terms of me moving there, in addition to not being used to frigid temperatures.
Right.
That's a whole nother transition.
Yeah, I love that story you tell of getting off the airplane and like flip-flops and sundress, and like people just running to you with coats. And
yes,
right.
my mother had this when, and in the pre 9/11, when you could walk up to the gates, right, and meet whoever it was you were picking up. And coming from Trinidad, we didn't really have winter clothes there, so I had sundress and some sandals on. Got stopped in Miami because the items in my suitcase didn't match where I said I was going, so customs held me back until I was able to explain, that's where I was going. And I remember the officer said, okay, don't say I didn't warn you. And at that time I was thinking, what kind of a welcome to the US is that, sir? I called him sir. And I'm 16, and I'm like, remember, I'm a little feisty too, right? I'm trying to be, responsible. I'm traveling by myself, and all of that, get to South Dakota. And I could see my mother off, at the gate, and she had this big coat in her hand, and she was yelling. She's like, run, Annicia. And I was like, I can't feel my damn toes. I can't.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So South Dakota, but I think that's interesting, because I thought, I knew you had the engineering degree, and I thought it was like engineering and then you kind of transitioned to architecture, but it was a vision of architecture from the beginning, it seems like. And then you went to CU for architecture. So was that vision pretty clear pretty early on of architecture? And then when you got to CU, was it what you expected it to be?
Well, it became clear back in Trinidad. So after, I had, spent time with my father on the construction side, got into my architectural classes in high school. I had some really good, mentors in high school that sort of, helped nurture that part of my skill. And it was upon, graduating back there, I decided that that's the field I wanted to go into. So it started even, way back in Trinidad. And so come into the US, which a lot of, students in the Caribbean do as well. They come over, will finish high school there and come over to the US to start college here. And so for me, it was, okay, so that's the plan. And the plan is to study architecture. But when I got there, they didn't have the exclusive program. And so the engineering, which I also enjoyed, sort of was the precursor, and now, has become even more meaningful to me, right? Rather than just a precursor to architecture.
Right. And so then why CU?
So when I finished school there in South Dakota, I wasn't very knowledgeable, I'll say, about, schools in America, universities in America. I was trying to do, my research in terms of getting used to or getting to know, what types of schools were out there, what programs were offered. And I will be honest, I was just like, it is too cold in South Dakota. I don't know if there should be a criteria, but I was looking at, places that were warmer.
Slightly warmer. There's a lot warmer places.
I didn't quite, fulfill that. But I had a close colleague of mine in engineering school. His name was Josh. We ended up, becoming really good friends. And he was from Colorado. And he told me a lot about Colorado. And you have to understand, being in Rapid City, South Dakota, sometimes it can feel so isolated, so enclosed, that just even, sort of leaving the state, even if it was for a weekend or something like that, was kind of like, oh, I'm going to the city, I'm going to Denver, I'm going to, to get to see and experience, just everything else you would imagine, you would experience in a city. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually quite enjoy, I enjoy what they call West River, South Dakota. So the Black Hills,
all right.
all of that, just the most beautiful landscape you'll ever see. And so I still, really enjoy that part of the state. But so yeah, my friend, Josh sort of convinced me to check out Colorado. And I had been here, one or two times before, but I still didn't know very much. So for me, it was like, well, it's not like I had been to any other state and I could, sort of compare. At the time, it was like new adventure. Okay. And, I'll just, sort of go forth and see what was out there.
Yeah. And I know, like, now the school seems fairly diverse, like within my students, and was it, so I assume that a technical school at South Dakota wasn't very diverse in terms of gender or anything else. But then coming to CU at that time was a little bit more diverse and a little bit more maybe closer to what you were used to in Trinidad, Tobago. Not really, or?
Unfortunately not. It wasn't at all. I was exposed to more diversity in terms of, the city and, sort of the metropolis of Denver and some of the other sort of surrounding areas in terms of people I met, when I got here. But in terms of the school, I remember my first year starting architecture, there was one other young lady, Black young lady who started with me. And in my first year, we were the only two Blacks that I knew. There were other minorities, but it wasn't, I can only speak for, what I remember from, sort of being a person of color, specifically Black. But in my year, it was just the two of us. And then she left after the first semester. And then it was me.
So you get to be the unicorn again?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew in the year ahead, there was, I knew of a Brazilian student, a Vietnamese student, and I think those were, and, a couple of students from Europe, but not on the minority side,
Right.
But yeah, it was just me. And I remember telling her, I was like, don't do it, like hang in there, but yep, I didn't see much by way of the student body or the faculty.
Right. Which is still kind of the case now, but
Yes.
so I think, well, we'll get into that. But so school then, and was there any kind of surprises in the degree itself of like architecture, or how you kind of steered your academic path within the school, and then how it kind of led towards a job afterwards?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember thinking, or really sort of feeling like I was being exposed to this whole side of architecture that where we talk about ideas, conceptual ideas, or how we might evaluate a site within a community, so all of these like non sort of technical discussions that you might have at the beginning, right, of a project. Right. I remember coming to see you and thinking, I'd love to talk about that, but the academic side of me, based on where I was coming from, was having a hard time sort of reconciling the two. And I remember I spoke with there was a particular professor, I don't know if I should call his name or not.
Who was it? Yeah.
Robert Flanagan, and he's actually he's retiring this year. Yeah. I remember there was a pinup, and it was actually two of them. It was Robert Flanagan, and then Phil Gallegos actually had said a couple of things to me, but in particular Bob, we call him Bob. I was telling him, I said, Bob, I don't know. I'm coming from this highly technical background. I can, the engineering, I could crank, I could, the math and understand, these sort of structural concepts. And I enjoy architecture. And he had heard me talk about architecture. And he said, Annicia, you're just going to have to figure out and find a way to somehow get your background, this technical background, right? Not to mesh, but he was like, use it as a bolstering tool, right?
Right.
And I didn't, and first of all, I was like, okay, I think Bob just yelled at me. And I was like, I know I should listen. I had to tone the feist down just a little bit, and I will never forget that. And it's until he said that, Adam, I remember going through subsequent studios, and I hadn't figured it out. I was still trying to figure, really understand, well, how do I take my background and allow it to be this thing that could support, this new thing I was studying. And I think it didn't happen until maybe Studio 4 or something.
4 out of 6. Yeah.
And I remember feeling so, like, even that much more appreciative, right, of that technical background. And actually, I'll tell you this, the first thing I did say when I got to, my first year, I said, I don't know if I can get all touchy-feely with these architecture students. I literally said, I remember that's exactly what I was feeling, and I said it. And I think that's probably what I said to Bob, and maybe that's why I got that reaction from him. But it didn't happen until studios later that, I saw that, what the potential was.
Right. So then when did you graduate? What year?
Oh no, I don't know if I want to put that out.
Okay,
there.
well, it doesn't matter. I graduated in 09, and it's always like that's the downturn, and it influences how the job market was. So let's just say we'll go past that.
Well, no. Actually, I usually say that because then my students, if they hear, they start doing the math and they try to figure out. You're like, okay, I graduated in 2007.
Okay, so that was a good economy. And so what happened when you graduated? Where'd you go to next, and what did that look like?
Well, I did an internship. I started in my last year of architecture school. I was working at Sprocket Design Build. Back then it was Sprocket Design Build. So I started that in 2006 and worked with them for a year. And they offered me a job upon graduation. And I don't know if you want me to go much past that, because then, 2008 happened. And so should I just go into that?
Yeah, do it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So worked for Sprocket for a year, and then 2008 happened. At Sprocket, essentially, and not just Sprocket, but a lot of firms, as you would recall also too, had to lay off, their employees. And Sprocket almost, they had to sort of take their staff down, to sort of bare minimum, just to be able to sort of continue for,
Right.
to make it through that time. But the one thing they said to me before, I remember the last day I was there, one of the principals, who's, one of my they've essentially become family, and I'll tell you why later on. But Matt McHugh, who was one of the owners and principals, said to me, he said it was a difficult decision for everyone, that was involved. But he said, if in 6 years' time we're able, and I'm wondering why that number came out. He's like 5-6 years, if we're able to build ourselves back and really get back, sort of the staff that we have. He was like, you will be getting a call from us.
Nice.
And I appreciated hearing that, but at the same time, you're like, well, so many things could happen, right, in 5-6 years. And I had went to work miraculously found a job during that time.
Wow.
At another firm, H&L Architecture. Back then it was known as H&L Architecture, and I practiced there for almost 6 years, because I got the call from Sprocket almost 6 years later when they had rebuilt.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long time to rebuild,
I know.
right? That's when you found a good firm, right? The idea of that kind of word and coming back to you. And
yeah.
So you went back with them, and kind of briefly tell us about the kind of their setup and the kind of business model, especially that design build at that larger scale, and your role within it.
Well, Sprocket was, so it's Matt McHugh, who's one of the owners and principals, and Bill Moore, also owner and principal. And Bill had, was coming with the design and sort of heavy construction background. And Matt was, sort of the lead in terms of the design aspect. Just, I love watching him work too. He's, an incredible designer and passionate, and just, so for me, it was really nice to be around a group of people that had, that drive and passion as well. But they were, just really interested in also the fun part of architecture too,
Nice.
So they design and build. A lot of their projects back then, we were, was primarily residential. And I would say, sometimes we would have, some what I call one-off time projects that was, like just a little sort of extra injection of a fun, experience. So I started there primarily and exclusively on the design side. Worked for a number of years. I had a slight break because I was teaching at the same time as well, and they were very accommodating of me teaching. I was able to use, but teaching became this, other, sort of blessing in terms of 2008 happening.
Yeah.
But it was, I didn't start teaching until 2010, but it was another way that I could sort of, supplement my income, at that time. And I was able to keep that going. But Sprocket was very gracious in allowing me to do both. And so worked for them when I went back for a couple of years, took a break to just explore, just teaching. I thought, maybe I would transition then.
Really?
But, and then over happy hour one evening, because I would keep, in contact with Bill and Matt and some of my colleagues there. I met up with Bill, and we had this little, where the office was, there's a place called Dazzle right next to it. That was sort of our happy hour location. We
Nice.
love, it was just a couple of steps next door. And, Bill said to me, we met and he said, Annicia, I have a proposition for you. There's a software, we're wanting to implement to sort of use for our construction, management and administration process. And he said, I'm wondering if maybe you could come in, learn the software in a week, and then get the projects all loaded onto this software, and then turn around and teach everybody how to use the software in the office and in the field. And actually he said specifically, he's like, you tell everybody what to do, because that's what you do. But he thought,
nice feistiness. Yeah.
Yeah, he thought that I could put together the knowledge and, sort of history I had with working, at Sprocket. But then also, since I was teaching, he was like, yeah, we could just put those two things together. And we're doing this both with drinks in our hands.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that was, it worked out. I mean, it worked out, but, I don't know if it was the best setting to decide that.
And you said, what's my raise going to be for this new job title? Yeah. This new experience.
Yeah. So, and I that's what happened. I came in, learned this software it was a week, got the other projects, got all the projects that we had, active at the time onto this software, loaded on this software, and then started training everyone in the office and then training everyone in the field, which that was a whole nother experience. But, and I'm pretty sure, those guys in the field were like, who is this? Because I showed up in, in that construction trailer, and I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is the schedule, right? And so I became, the project administrator for the company. So I was working out primarily on the construction side. I wasn't doing, any design at that point. So they were basically, sort of putting, sort of revamping the CA side of their construction business. And I continued to train, any new employees we had. And I was training both on the design side and the construction side, because the software, involved everything from pre-design to punch list.
Really?
So, yes. So I was.
In what ways does it involve pre-design? Like,
so it was specifically, based on how we wanted to start the project. So anything from, sort of client meetings, any type of, initial surveys, any type of that, specific discussions that we might have, pre-setting up the project. You could get, sort of use this platform to facilitate that. And then because we started it, you would have started it in that project, you could sort of, the information was kept on a single, sort of project shell, that you could then, sort of keep referencing information across these project tools that led to punch lists.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really interesting, like knowing that you're that part of the aspect of the firm there. And, you texted me earlier this week and you said, oh, is it going to be an issue if I'm not a licensed architect? Do you only want licensed architects? And I said something about like hell no, like I don't care if the AIA says you're an architect or whatever, I also have a sort of hard relationship with like the idea of being licensed and that saying something, but you said that you had this bit of a academic versus practice battle, and that was part of it. And I think it's interesting how you're dealing with CA in practice, but then you're teaching graduate studios early on theory and stuff like that, and that kind of dichotomy there. And also, I didn't realize that you had been full-time teaching earlier on, because you just pretty much switched full-time teaching this year, right? Well. So talk about that kind of battle,
Yeah, it wasn't quite, full-time. I was teaching at 2 institutions. I had gotten a request from another colleague who, wanted to see if I had any interest in teaching in their program. And so because I wasn't full-time with CU, I was able, to do that as well. So it was like, multiple part-times that made up a full-time, schedule. And so that's what that was. So it you know, tested the waters a bit, you know, for me then. And then, yeah, so the and I also like how you painted it, you know, I was sort of responsible for this, you know, part of the project that is, you know, still quite high level in terms of executing the project. But then, you know, I'm teaching design, you know, sort of these early design studios that, you know, teaching sort of these fundamental, you know, ideas about architecture and how you even start to, you know, how you'd approach, right, design.
Right. Yeah.
And so for putting those two worlds together, I realized that, and I said a battle, because it's not that just it's like there's this negative side to it, but it's this thing that I have to, you know, consider, which is why, you know, I'm still on the path to licensure, and a couple other things that I've added to my plate. And, you know, that's a whole nother story about my busybodiness. But I have two spectrums of those two roles that I'm trying to accomplish. But for me, Adam, what the way I looked at it was, I always used to say I want my students to be all-round designers. And that meant that they had to look even outside of architecture. They had to appreciate, right, the contributing fields outside of architecture to be able to make them strong within architecture. And so if I could speak to you about some, you know, some aspect of the project that was, you know, months, years, even, you know, based on a construction schedule down the line, that could somehow come back and explain something that, you know, it would be dependent on, you know, at the beginning of a project based on a single decision, right?
Yeah.
To me, that was, I mean, that's a spectrum I love to cover. And I experience it still, because I remember the first time so I was teaching design studios, and then I started teaching the structures courses at CU. And I had a student say to me, he said, Annicia, he's like, I'm just going through a little bit of a psychological shuffling right now. He's like, because he's like, just yesterday, you and I were in the studio and we were talking about this, you know, these conceptual ideas, nothing technical or anything like that. And he said, and now today I'm sitting here and you're in front of me and you're pounding these formulas down my throat and we're talking, you know, this structural, you know, technical things. And he said, he's like, I'm just trying to reconcile. He's like, first of all, I'm trying to figure you out. And I was like, I was like, that's not your objective here.
Yeah. Back off. Yeah.
Back off. but he was being, you know, just really genuine and saying, he's like, I'm trying to just understand how you can do both. And let's just say he had this real perplexed, you know, look on his face, because I just went all in, you know.
Right. Yeah. But it's so difficult. I mean, you know, that straddling those two worlds, like I'm finding it more and more difficult. And the idea of teaching studio and then going back to an office and trying to switch your mind, and it's tiring, and it's, you know, and there's always that thought of, well, should I just try to pursue academia or stay here, or and it seems like this year you've kind of made a choice possibly to pursue more academia. Is that right? Or
yes, yeah. You know, I was, you know, sort of finishing, and I won't even say finishing up with Sprocket, because, you know, they offered me the opportunity to do some consulting with them. And that's, you know, that's good for me. I do want to keep, you know, my foot in the industry, in that manner, so that I am, you know, current, up to date. I'm just having, you know, even if it's just having conversations, right? Understand what's, you know, sort of current in terms of trajectories of where the industry is going. But I've always enjoyed teaching, Adam. And this has been tugging at me for not just this past year, not the last 2 years, for many years. And I'll say that this isn't just teaching in the architecture field. As you know, I'm also a dancer and choreographer, and I've modeled for years, and I've ended up in teaching capacities in those fields as well. Some of the time, not even on my own, you know, my own efforts, I've been approached and asked, you know, to teach. And I was like, how did that person know that I, you know, even had an interest in teaching? Some people have just boldly come up to me and say, you need to be teaching this. and like literally just walked away, you know. So it was more in sort of response to not just fulfilling that goal, but answering that call for me as a purpose.
Right. And
purpose.
And you're totally right about this hour limit. It's not a real limit, but like when I was writing out, I have like a real brief outline, and I was writing that out last night, and I was like, she has a lot going on. This is gonna last. But I want to try to get into that a little bit. So I like talking a lot about community on this podcast. But so what is your community here within Denver, like professionally and with all these other kind of things you're doing as well?
Well, we can start on, the professional side. As I, mentioned, I'm still very much, connected, with my, and I'll say family and community at Sprocket. When I think about, those guys have known me since I was a student. I just did the math the other day, and I said they knew me when I was.
I won't make you tell the number. That was enough that you had.
Yeah. But I was thinking they've seen me sort of go through some phases and changes. And when you think about, being in a community, being in a family, that's what, like that's part of the story too. So, professionally, I'm still, connected to both, my colleagues on the design side and construction side. I spent a lot of time. I didn't just train people in the field. I spent time in the field as well. And then, there's the academic side too. So people I've had as professors and now, are either, colleagues or, sort of past colleagues with. And I also like to consider, my students, a vital part of my community too, because it's really about sort of passing on what I know that would set them up, right, for their futures, to continue to build our community, our design community. And I don't want to say on the other side, because before I used to try to keep these worlds like really separate, Adam, but I keep running into instances where they try to, sort of intertwine, and sometimes I just let them do that. But I was teaching dance here a number of years ago as well, with another friend of mine who was also a teacher, but she taught dance primarily. She had a small dance school here for a few years, so I started teaching. I'm trained in the Latin dancing.
Yeah, when did the dancing and the modeling come in? How did that?
Gosh.
That's the story we should be talking about. Yeah.
So I actually started modeling a long time ago. My first fashion show was when I was 5.
Really? Huh.
And it wasn't planned. I wasn't supposed to be in the show. My mother is a cosmetologist, and she was working the fashion show, this big fashion show in Trinidad that night. And her boss came to her and said, my mom's name is Denise. She said, Denise, I don't know what I'm going to do. One of the models didn't show up. It's going to mess the lineup and the timing and everything. She was like, what do I do? And I remember I was standing there with my mother watching her do one of the models here. And I was wearing this new dress she had got for me. And she looked down at me and she's like, Annicia, do you want to do this? And I knew exactly what she meant. And my mom's boss was like, oh, should we put her on to fill, to fill the time? And I told my mom, I was like, yeah, I can do this. I'm 5. And I got my new dress on. I want to show this off. And Adam, I remember that was one of the longest runways, in a kid's mind, right? And it was just me and my mom, and she would show me how to do little things. And I remember she said, okay, do this, this, and that. And I said, okay. And I remember they lifted me up and put me on the stage, and I walked the runway, took up the time that they told me to take up, and came back, and then the show went on. So I was doing that, since then. I did other shows since then.
And so were you doing it in South Dakota and Colorado and all the way through?
I actually did. I didn't do it as much in South Dakota. I did more, there used to be these they might still have them, but these sort of model conferences and conventions where you'd go get training and meet, agents and all of that. But when I came to Colorado, this is why I say I can't completely separate these models. I was like, okay, I'm only here for architecture and architecture alone. I was out here a week, and I was walking in the grocery with pushing my cart. Jumps in front of me, and she said, but to come model from my cousin. She's a designer here in Denver. And I was like, I don't know anybody here in Denver, but I'm going to trust this lady. I'll maybe let, a couple people know where I'll be during this casting call. And I went and met the designer, and I have been modeling for this designer for the entire time that she was doing. It was a period of about 3 to 5 years where she was constantly, putting out lines. And I actually just, recently, maybe a month ago, did, modeled for her for one of her new businesses. And I'm thinking, after all these years.
Wow, nice.
So that's the modeling side. And the dance side was, my colleague who I started teaching with. It was just a chance meeting, and she was like, will you come teach for me? And so that's how that happened. Yeah,
I mean, I thought it was interesting. I was on a review for you one time it was for that dance project with Chloe Parker Robinson here in Denver. And it was this really nice introduction to that kind of dance, Colorado dance world, especially like kind of 5 points culture there. Have you been connected with her and that like pretty consistently, or
not as consistently, because so we finished that studio project last year, which was that was when COVID really happened, right? So the studio design project, we got to halfway during the semester, and then we had to transition to remote. To our remote setting. Well, as you can imagine, it also affected their plans too. They were, sort of going through this massive, effort to sort of, sort of redesign their campus, right? Now they're in a old historic church building, but they had plans to expand the campus. So that has all been, halted, and they've been really, sort of working at ways to keep the dance, not only their dancers, but the dance community, right, intact. I haven't had so much constant, interaction with them, but as once you're in the dance community, you're always sort of, keeping up to date on what workshops are going on, who might be doing a specific presentation. And now, it's primarily, it's all virtual. They did have some things where they were doing outside. So I'm trying to sort of maintain connection like that, but then we also do it as a way of supporting each other, because we know what each other is going through in terms of, not being able to come together in person and dance in person, and it affects you financially too.
Right.
So, I'm not teaching dance at the moment. So I was making sure, to sort of do workshops or, take, classes wherever I could have to support, my fellow teachers.
Yeah, I think this might be a leading question or a packed question, but just playing off of that, how has 2020 looked differently for you? And I think there's probably lots of different ways, but it seems like your profile within Denver has been elevated as well in 2020. More speaking and more interviews and more things, right? I mean, so I'll let you take that, however, but.
Yeah. I kind of, when you said elevated, I'm so like, I'm like, no, Adam, I'm just doing me, But I will speak to, yes, okay, so we can talk about, COVID, but it specifically, we know the event, right, that started that triggered, not just an uproar, but triggered years and memories and, just everything that had to deal with the just the treatment of Blacks, and not Blacks, but minorities, underrepresented communities. That week, I have to tell you, right? So when George Floyd was murdered, and we saw different, sort of industries, and I could speak to, architecture in particular, starting to internally look at themselves, right? Whether it be schools, universities, firms, whatever the entity is there. Let's just say my phone, I got a lot of phone calls, a lot of requests. And I did one particular interview with the AIA. It was their discussion about race.
Right.
So I did that, and then there's some other people I spoke to offline, and I feel now I rarely say I'm tired, but there was even one or two people that I just had to say no to, because I didn't want to be my full potential and full ability. I didn't want to not be that in terms of expressing my thoughts, or given just my, even if it's just just thinking about just discussing what we were going through.
Right.
I was mentally tired, and for me to even admit I was tired, that's just not a zone I'm used to being in.
Right.
But so I understand what you mean when you say sort of that my profile was elevated, but it was at the same time I felt a little bit of diminishing due to this weight I was feeling. It was such a heavy weight, and it wasn't only on the professional side, it was the academic side too. And it was just even in my social circles, because I saw close friends and colleagues of mine hurting just as much. And it was like, okay, so I'm looking at my field, within architecture, and I see all these, everything that everyone is trying to do in terms of becoming, we say, just really aware of what we were truly dealing with. But I don't know how much internally, people were really able to see and understand, and you want to share it all, but you're tired at the same time.
Right. Yeah. And you've probably, it seems like you've been so used to being such a minority in South Dakota or in Colorado, and kind of getting used to that. Maybe, I mean, I don't know if I told you, but my sister was adopted. She's 9 years younger than me, and she's Black.
Oh, I didn't know
that. We grew up, in the middle of Kansas, really small town. And so I see a lot of kind of parallels with you two, just growing up in that kind of situation. And I think, it's I mean, you told a story about one time of just a kind of an event that of how you were treated by somebody, and it really hit me a lot, just thinking about my sister in that time, and the kind of parallels there as well. But I think, so we don't need to dwell on it, I guess, but I didn't know what you kind of wanted to go into or not. I think, like, with this podcast, I'm very aware, like on my Instagram page, it's 5 dudes that look the same, that have the same colored glasses, and I have, like, I've invited so far like 16 people, and 8 of them have been women, but it's all the guys who I guess have the time to come and talk so far. But I think just that the idea of diversity within the community here, I'll edit all this mumbling out that I'm doing, but I think at least within my students, my class, right, it seems like there's a lot more diversity, and I don't know, is this a new thing, and we'll see the ramifications of that diversity in the Denver profession in 5 years when they get out, or is it a thing where the diversity somehow gets kind of filtered out?
First of all, it's kind of sad, that we have to even call it a thing, right, Adam?
Right.
because, you know, not just, you know, nationally, but internationally, there's a whole different world out there. And sometimes I say, you know, if people could only see, you know, even how other countries get an understanding of how other countries even, you know, sort of deal with, you know, situations that, you know, challenge diversity, or, you know, sort of racial equity and societal, you know, some of these societal problems, you would find, you know, sort of positive and negative things, but it would open your eyes so much more, right? So to even have to call it a thing. I spoke to a group recently, and I said that I made it very clear that this wasn't something that was just hip today and should not be considered that, but this was something very rooted. We've been using the word systemic, and I said you're going to hear that word over and over again, but I don't want you to just, you need to hear it, but you need to understand like what that means, right? You need to search and search yourself, and search, you know, just search and understand what systemic means, what rooted means. Think about it in terms of time, space, you know, experiences. They all sort of contribute to what we've been feeling, you know, all these years. And the reason, you know, sort of we're seeing, you know, this bubble over right now. It's not something that just, you know, became an issue yesterday. So I spoke very sternly, and I said this to the group, and I wanted them to know how serious I was about all the efforts that are being, you know, that we're seeing now in terms of, you know, firms, universities, you know, other companies putting out, you know, diversity statements or initiatives to really look about, you know, to look at their, you know, equitable practices, right? Their inclusion practices, their diversity practices. That I hope, Adam, I don't know if I could say, you know, yeah, this will be, you know, sustained, you know, and we'll continue to see, you know, sort of this, you know, this increase in awareness, because it's very easy for some people to remember and to forget. I'm actually working on a article series right now. You know, I'm titling it "A Promise to Remember." I don't know. I've lots of ideas. I don't know where it's going to go, but I just wanted everybody to know that it simply is not a hip thing. This affects not just, you know, who we are today, right? But it could affect not just the next generation, but generations to come. Because look at what got us here. There's generations and generations upon generations of mistreatment. And I'm going to start with that word. There's some even, you know, more graphic words I could use.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But just not a care for humanity at all. And that just, and you know, and you've seen me, Adam. You know, I say I'm feisty, but I do have other sides to me. You know, I remember that those weeks after, you know, I did those interviews. There's one week I just sat and cried. Did.
Right.
And then you get angry. And then, you know, you sort of, I go into my, you know, call to action mode. And I don't want it to be like cyclical, but for me, it keeps me remembering, right?
Right.
And I should mention this too, at the same time, I was on the founding board, I still am. We were founding the professional chapter of NOMA here in Colorado, which we are an official chapter right now.
Right, yeah.
And so it was just, it was amazing how, you know, the timing lined up, but I mean, I got so fired up, Adam, and I still am. Yeah, it was just, you know, just that overlap. So when I was tired, I had, you know, my, and I called we you know, I have two other colleagues I've been working really closely with. We call ourselves our sisters. We're really sisters in this, you know, sort of effort where we're trying to bring support and, you know, primarily support to our, you know, minority colleagues in the field, but it was having them at that time too, because we were able to share all the phone calls we were getting, all the requests we were getting, you know, but just share genuinely how we were feeling and just be able to support each other. Not just, you know, during that time, it's been continued, but we've been able to sort of manage it a little bit better because, you know, emotions and everything had flared up. It was, you know, everything was bubbling over, which sometimes to relieve pressure, right? You've got to let that happen.
Right. But such a strange time to be bubbling over with Corona as well, and just being bottled up and bubbling over. And yeah, well, let's move on to a nicer thing. What's been your mountaintop moment within your career? Would you say you've had the best moment where you look back and you said, man, this is worth it, this is great?
I don't know, this is gonna sound strange, and I don't think I've had it yet.
Yeah.
Adam. Yeah. And I don't know if I might attribute that to my, you know, my mentor and my boss, Matt McHugh, used to say my can-do attitude, you know.
What do you think that will look like? Is there a thing that you're like, once I do that, that's when I did that, when I'll make it, or something like that?
It's actually going to go back to my interaction with Bob Flanagan. I think my background, my two, you know, and I could speak about it in terms of my professional and academic background, but then there's also the sort of social and, you know, cultural side, you know, my cultural background too. But I think when I'm really sort of able to fully embrace, well, I've embraced it, but fully, like, you know, sort of execute, you know, the ability and power of, you know, sort of me having this part of architecture that it depends on, right, to be able to create, you know, spaces and places and community and homes and everything for people, and you know, sort of allow that to mesh with a beautiful sort of story, whether it's an idea or concept or just I say that I don't know if I've had it because I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know when I get there, I'll know what it looks like. No, I have specific goals.
Yeah.
I want to you know, finish my get, you know, my license. I want to get a PhD. I want to be on tenure track and get tenured. I want to do a travel and dance cooking show.
Nice.
I thought I'd just throw that one in there. I already have part of the pilot written out. I'll just say that. But actually, not specifically cooking. That's a whole other thing. But I want to do an architecture, travel, and dance series.
Nice. That's awesome. That was going to be my last question. Is do you know what's next? But it sounds like you really do know what's next. And I just want you to remember, when you get that nice TV show and you're traveling all nice places, I had you on my show, so now you can have me on your show. It'll be a little different, but yeah.
And all a part of my goal to never. That's my promise to remember, right?
There you go.
I'll never forget, Adam.
Great. Well, it's always so fun to see you in school and interact with you, and thanks so much for coming on and telling this story. So
thank you, Adam. I just want to say thank you as well. First of all, I think what you're, you know, just even your decision and willingness to do this, you're taking, you know, a lot of your time to invest in your time to allow us to tell our stories. I really, you know, like, I was so excited to hear you were doing that, and in a way, you're sort of, you know, helping. At least for me, I could speak for myself. Because even though, you know, I might say, you know, I did get, you know, it was, you know, a little bit mentally tiring and, you know, also physical, it does help when you talk and regurgitate. And for me, it's telling these stories bring a measure of like healing.
Nice.
And, you know, so for me, that's always a plus.
That's awesome. Almost everybody said that. You know, some people are hesitant to come on, but everybody afterwards said, wow, that's, you know, I haven't thought about how I got there for a while. And so I just love hearing stories. So thanks for telling them. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Take care, okay?
Talk later. Bye.
You can visit architecting.com, that's architect-ing.com, to see images from this week's guest.
And please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Have a great week and keep connecting.